If your life isn't working the way you hoped, don't curse the economy. Don't blame your parents. Don't point your finger at the government or bad luck. Start with something far more important and far more honest, your philosophy. Because long before circumstances shape your life, your philosophy shapes your choices. And your choices shape your results. A losing philosophy rarely begins as a dramatic decision to fail. It starts quietly, almost invisibly, through small thoughts repeated so often that they begin to feel like truth. A person experiences disappointment, rejection, or slow progress, and instead of learning from it, they draw a limiting conclusion. They say to themselves, "This is just how life is. People like me don't get ahead," or "No matter how hard I try, it won't change much." Over time, these thoughts settle into the mind like furniture that never gets moved. What was once a temporary emotion becomes a permanent belief. This is how a losing philosophy is formed, not through one big mistake, but through many small, unchallenged ideas. The most dangerous part of a losing philosophy is that it feels reasonable. It offers comfort instead of challenge. It explains away responsibility and replaces it with excuses that sound logical. When effort doesn't bring immediate rewards, the losing philosophy says effort is pointless. When discipline feels uncomfortable, it says comfort is more important. When growth demands patience, it whispers that waiting is safer than trying. These ideas protect a person from short-term discomfort, but they quietly steal long-term potential. A life guided by this philosophy may feel safe, but it will never feel fulfilled. To reprogram a losing philosophy, the first and most important step is to question it. Every belief must earn the right to stay. You must ask yourself where your conclusions came from. Did you truly test your limits, or did you quit early and label it failure? Did life actually defeat you, or did you simply stop showing up with intensity? Many beliefs collapse the moment they are examined honestly. What once seemed like a fact often turns out to be an assumption repeated too many times. A powerful shift occurs when you realize that philosophy precedes results. Long before success or failure shows up on the outside, it has already taken shape on the inside. Your philosophy determines what you attempt, how long you persist, and what you tolerate. If your philosophy says, "I do what I can when I feel like it," your results will always be inconsistent. If it says, "I do what is required regardless of how I feel," your results will begin to stabilize and grow. Life responds not to wishes, but to principles lived daily. One of the most effective ways to reprogram a losing philosophy is through personal responsibility. Not guilt, not shame, but ownership. Responsibility is empowering because it returns control to where it belongs. The moment you accept that your choices have more influence over your future than your circumstances, you reclaim your power. Blame weakens. Responsibility strengthens. Blame keeps you stuck in the past. Responsibility points you toward the future. Another essential change is redefining the meaning of difficulty. A losing philosophy treats difficulty as a stop sign. A winning philosophy treats it as a signal for growth. Every worthwhile skill demands effort. Every meaningful result requires patience. When you stop seeing hardship as punishment and start seeing it as preparation, your mindset shifts from avoidance to engagement. Instead of asking, "Why is this so hard?" you begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Reprogramming philosophy also requires new standards. Not new goals alone, but new expectations of yourself. Goals are something you want to achieve. Standards are something you refuse to live without. When your standards rise, your behavior follows. You stop negotiating with yourself about discipline. You stop making excuses for inconsistency. You no longer accept average effort while hoping for above average results. You begin to live in alignment with the person you want to become, not the person you used to be. Daily habits play a critical role in this transformation. Philosophy is not changed by a single burst of inspiration. It is changed by repeated action. Each small act of discipline sends a signal to the mind that you are capable, dependable, and in control. Reading when you don't feel like it, planning when it would be easier to drift, acting when procrastination feels tempting. These small choices rewire the inner dialogue. Over time, the mind begins to expect progress instead of excuses. A losing philosophy says, "I'll change when I feel ready." A stronger philosophy says, I'll act, and readiness will follow. Action is the great clarifier. It silences doubt and replaces it with evidence. Confidence is not built by thinking about doing something. It is built by doing it repeatedly. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you weaken the old philosophy and strengthen a new one. In the end, reprogramming a losing philosophy is about deciding that your future deserves a better set of beliefs than your past created. You are not obligated to think tomorrow the way you thought yesterday. You are allowed to upgrade your ideas, raise your expectations, and demand more from yourself. When your philosophy changes, your choices change. When your choices change, your life inevitably follows. A losing philosophy keeps a person trapped not because life is cruel, but because the mind becomes poorly trained. The mind, left undisciplined, will always search for the easiest explanation and the quickest escape from effort. It will magnify obstacles and minimize potential. It will convince you that the risk is too high, the timing is wrong, or the reward is uncertain. Over time, this mental pattern becomes automatic. You don't consciously decide to think small. You simply react the way you've trained yourself to react. Reprogramming this philosophy begins with understanding that the mind is a servant, not a master, and it must be trained deliberately. Most people allow their environment to do the programming. They listen to average opinions, surround themselves with discouraged voices, and consume information that reinforces limitation rather than possibility. A losing philosophy feeds on poor input. If you repeatedly hear that success is rare, effort is overrated, and failure is permanent, your mind will accept these ideas as reality. Not because they are true, but because they are familiar. Familiar ideas feel safe, even when they are destructive. To change the philosophy, you must change the input. What you read, what you listen to, and what you repeat to yourself daily matters more than most people realize. A powerful step in reprogramming is learning to pause between stimulus and response. Life will always present challenges, delays, and disappointments. The losing philosophy reacts immediately with frustration, excuses, or withdrawal. A stronger philosophy pauses and asks a better question. Instead of saying, "This always happens to me," it asks, "What can I do differently this time?" That pause is where growth lives. In that space, you regain choice. You move from being a victim of reaction to a creator of response. Another critical element is patience with progress. A losing philosophy expects quick results and gives up when they don't arrive. It underestimates the time required for transformation and overestimates how much can be achieved without consistency. When progress feels slow, discouragement sets in and old habits return. Reprogramming requires a longer view. You must adopt the belief that small improvements, done daily, compound into massive change. The person who wins is rarely the one who moves fastest at the beginning, but the one who refuses to stop. Discipline plays a central role in this shift. Discipline is not punishment, it is self-respect in action. A losing philosophy treats discipline as optional, something to practice only when motivation is high. A stronger philosophy understands that discipline creates motivation, not the other way around. When you act despite resistance, you build inner authority. You prove to yourself that feelings do not control you. This proof is essential because belief grows from evidence. Each disciplined act becomes evidence that the old philosophy was wrong. Reprogramming also means redefining failure. In a losing philosophy, failure is personal and final. It becomes a label rather than a lesson. One setback turns into a verdict on self-worth. A healthier philosophy sees failure as feedback. It asks what went wrong, what can be improved, and what must be tried again. This shift removes fear from action. When failure is no longer a threat to identity, effort becomes easier and more consistent. Another powerful change occurs when you stop negotiating with yourself. A losing philosophy is full of inner debates. Maybe tomorrow? Just this once? It won't matter? These small negotiations erode integrity. Over time, the mind learns that promises mean nothing. Reprogramming requires decisiveness. When you decide to act, you act. When you commit, you follow through. This consistency builds trust with yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Your identity also plays a role. A losing philosophy ties identity to past behavior. I've always been like this. A stronger philosophy ties identity to direction. This is who I am becoming. You are not your history. You are your habits in motion. The moment you begin to see yourself as a disciplined, responsible, and growing individual, your actions begin to align with that identity. Behavior follows belief, but belief can be shaped by behavior. Reprogramming a losing philosophy demands repetition. One good day does not undo years of poor thinking. The mind must be reminded daily of new standards and new truths. This is why routines matter. Morning reflection, daily planning, and regular review keep the philosophy fresh and active. Without reinforcement, the old patterns return quietly. In the end, the transformation is simple, but not easy. You replace excuses with responsibility, reaction with intention, and comfort with growth. You stop waiting for permission and start acting on principle. When the philosophy changes, the internal dialogue changes. When the dialogue changes, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, life eventually has no choice but to change as well. A losing philosophy survives because it is rarely challenged by deliberate decision. Most people drift into their way of thinking rather than choose it. They adopt beliefs from their surroundings, from past disappointments, and from repeated failures without ever stopping to ask whether those beliefs deserve authority over their future. Over time, this passive acceptance becomes dangerous. The mind begins to operate on autopilot, repeating old patterns even when they no longer serve any purpose. Reprogramming this philosophy requires one powerful act: conscious decision. You must decide that the way you have been thinking is no longer acceptable, and that a new internal standard will govern your life. Decision is the turning point. Until a decision is made, change remains a wish. A losing philosophy prefers wishing because wishing carries no responsibility. Decision, on the other hand, demands action. The moment you decide to think differently, you also decide to act differently. This is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. You can no longer hide behind circumstances once you have chosen a new direction. But that discomfort is the price of progress, and it is far cheaper than the lifelong cost of regret. One of the most damaging elements of a losing philosophy is emotional attachment to the past. Past mistakes, failures, and missed opportunities become reference points that define identity. The mind says, "I tried before and it didn't work," as if the past has the authority to dictate the future. Reprogramming requires emotional separation from past outcomes. The past is data, not destiny. It exists to inform better decisions, not to imprison ambition. When you stop using yesterday as evidence against tomorrow, possibility re-enters your thinking. A powerful way to weaken a losing philosophy is through consistency. Motivation rises and falls, but consistency reshapes identity. Each day you act in alignment with your new standards, you reinforce the belief that change is real and sustainable. Even small actions, when repeated, carry enormous psychological weight. The mind begins to say, "This is who we are now." That shift in self-perception is critical because people always act in harmony with how they see themselves. Language also plays a major role in reprogramming. A losing philosophy uses careless language. "I can't," "I have to," "stuck." That's just how it is. These phrases reinforce powerlessness. A stronger philosophy chooses language that reflects control and intention. "I choose," "I will learn," "I am improving," "I am responsible." Language is not just communication, it is instruction to the mind. Change the language, and you begin to change the internal experience of life. Another important shift is learning to delay gratification. A losing philosophy prioritizes immediate pleasure over long-term reward. It chooses what feels good, now at the expense of what would be better later. Reprogramming requires reversing that order. You begin to value progress more than comfort and growth more than ease. This does not mean rejecting enjoyment. It means earning it. When you learn to delay gratification, you gain control over impulse, and impulse control is a hallmark of personal strength. Reprogramming also involves exposure to higher standards. A losing philosophy often survives in isolation, surrounded by similar thinking. When everyone around you settles for average, average feels normal. Introducing your mind to higher expectations, through ideas, examples, and disciplined routines, raises your internal benchmark. You begin to see that what once felt difficult is actually ordinary for someone with better habits. This realization removes the illusion that excellence is reserved for a special few. Another essential element is forgiveness of self. A losing philosophy is often fueled by self-criticism that turns into self-sabotage. People punish themselves mentally for past failures, believing that harshness will lead to improvement. In reality, it leads to paralysis. Reprogramming requires honest evaluation without condemnation. You acknowledge where you fell short, commit to doing better, and move forward without dragging emotional baggage. Growth requires clarity, not cruelty. As this new philosophy takes root, patience becomes vital. Change rarely announces itself with dramatic results. It shows up quietly through better choices, improved focus, and increased resilience. The danger is quitting too early, just before the internal shift becomes permanent. The mind tests commitment by offering doubt and fatigue. Those who persist through this phase break free from the old programming. Ultimately, reprogramming a losing philosophy is an act of self-leadership. You stop allowing circumstances, emotions, and history to dictate your direction. You choose principles over impulse and intention over habit. When your philosophy becomes deliberate rather than accidental, your life begins to reflect strength, clarity, and forward motion. The external world eventually aligns with the internal decision to live by a higher standard. A losing philosophy often keeps people busy but unproductive. It encourages motion without direction, effort without strategy, and activity without reflection. People wake up, react to the day, handle what is urgent, and repeat the cycle, believing that staying busy is the same as moving forward. Over time, this creates exhaustion without fulfillment. Reprogramming a losing philosophy requires learning the difference between activity and progress. Progress is intentional. It is guided by purpose, values, and clear priorities, not by habit or pressure. One of the most powerful changes in thinking comes from learning to think long-term. A losing philosophy focuses on immediate outcomes. If results don't appear quickly, enthusiasm fades. If recognition doesn't arrive soon, effort declines. This short-term mindset makes consistency nearly impossible. Reprogramming requires adopting a future-based perspective. You begin to ask how today's actions will affect your life months and years from now. This shift transforms decision-making. Small, disciplined choices begin to matter because they are seen as investments rather than inconveniences. Another critical adjustment involves self-image. A losing philosophy often carries an outdated self-image, one based on past performance rather than present intention. People unconsciously act in ways that protect their old identity, even when it limits growth. If someone sees themselves as undisciplined, they will unconsciously sabotage moments of discipline to stay consistent with that image. Reprogramming demands a new internal picture. You begin to see yourself as capable, responsible, and evolving. This vision does not require perfection, it requires direction. The mind works tirelessly to match behavior with identity. Environment also plays a significant role in sustaining or changing philosophy. A losing philosophy thrives in environments that encourage distraction, excuse-making, and low standards. When your surroundings constantly pull you toward comfort and convenience, discipline feels unnatural. Reprogramming means intentionally shaping your environment to support growth. This includes reducing distractions, organizing your space, and surrounding yourself, physically or mentally, with influences that challenge you to improve. The environment should make the right choice easier, not harder. Another vital element is learning to measure progress correctly. A losing philosophy often measures progress by mood or motivation. On days you feel good, you believe you are doing well. On days you feel tired or discouraged, you assume you are failing. This emotional measurement leads to inconsistency. Reprogramming requires objective measurement. You begin to track habits, actions, and commitments rather than feelings. Did you show up? Did you complete what you planned? Did you act in alignment with your standards? These questions build stability and momentum. The ability to persist through boredom is another distinguishing factor. A losing philosophy seeks constant stimulation. When routines feel dull, interest fades. Yet most meaningful progress is repetitive and unglamorous. Mastery is built through doing the basics well, over and over again. Reprogramming requires embracing boredom as a sign of consistency, not stagnation. When you can perform necessary actions without excitement, you gain a powerful advantage over those who rely on emotion to move forward. Reprogramming also involves learning to say no. A losing philosophy spreads energy too thin, trying to please everyone and chase every opportunity. This leads to diluted effort and frustration. A stronger philosophy values focus. You begin to protect your time and attention, understanding that every yes carries a cost. By saying no to distractions and misaligned commitments, you say yes to your long-term vision. Focus is not about doing more. It is about doing what matters. Another shift occurs in how you handle setbacks. A losing philosophy treats setbacks as signals to stop or slow down. A stronger philosophy treats them as part of the process. Progress is rarely linear. There will be days of momentum and days of resistance. Reprogramming means staying committed to the process even when results temporarily decline. You learn to separate temporary outcomes from long-term direction. As long as direction is correct, persistence will eventually produce results. As this philosophy strengthens, patience deepens. You stop demanding immediate validation from the world. You trust the process because you understand it. This trust reduces anxiety and increases resilience. You no longer need constant reassurance because your confidence is rooted in daily action rather than external approval. In time, the old losing philosophy loses its influence. It no longer dictates your reactions or decisions. A new philosophy takes its place, one built on intention, responsibility, and steady effort. Life begins to feel less chaotic and more purposeful. Progress becomes predictable. And while challenges remain, they no longer control your direction. Your philosophy does. A losing philosophy ultimately collapses when a person learns to govern themselves. Self-governance is the highest form of personal power. It means you no longer depend on mood, pressure, or circumstance to decide how you act. Most people are governed from the outside, by deadlines, by fear, by approval, or by crisis. A losing philosophy thrives in this condition because it never requires consistency. You act only when forced. Reprogramming that philosophy means shifting from being externally driven to being internally directed. At the center of self-governance is the ability to keep promises to yourself. A losing philosophy treats self-promises lightly. It says, "I'll try," instead of "I will." Over time, broken promises weaken self-trust. The mind learns that intention means nothing. This creates hesitation, doubt, and low confidence. Reprogramming requires restoring integrity with yourself. You start small. You do what you said you would do, even when no one is watching. Each kept promise rebuilds authority. Authority over self leads to confidence, and confidence leads to momentum. Another critical transformation involves emotional mastery. A losing philosophy allows emotions to dictate behavior. When you feel inspired, you act. When you feel tired, frustrated, or uncertain, you retreat. This creates an unstable life because emotions are temporary and unreliable. Reprogramming means learning to act on principle rather than feeling. You acknowledge emotions without obeying them. You move forward even when motivation is absent. This ability separates those who grow from those who remain stuck. A powerful part of reprogramming is understanding delayed reward. Life always pays later, not sooner. Effort is made today, but results arrive in the future. A losing philosophy demands immediate payoff. If rewards are delayed, it assumes the effort is wasted. A stronger philosophy understands compounding. Small actions, repeated consistently, create exponential results over time. This belief changes everything. You stop quitting too early. You stop judging progress prematurely. You stay the course long enough for life to respond. Reprogramming also requires redefining success. A losing philosophy defines success as comfort, ease, or recognition. When these are absent, discouragement follows. A stronger philosophy defines success as alignment. Did you act according to your values? Did you honor your commitments? Did you grow, even slightly today? This internal definition of success creates stability. You no longer depend on external applause to validate your effort. Your satisfaction comes from knowing you are becoming stronger and more capable. Another key shift is embracing personal standards as non-negotiable. A losing philosophy negotiates constantly. It looks for exceptions and loopholes. Just this once becomes a habit. Reprogramming demands firmness. Standards are not rules imposed from the outside, they are decisions made for self-respect. When you decide what you will and will not tolerate from your behavior, your effort, and your thinking, you eliminate internal conflict. Clarity replaces confusion. The role of reflection cannot be overlooked. A losing philosophy avoids reflection because it exposes inconsistency. Reprogramming requires regular evaluation. You review your actions, assess your progress, and make adjustments without self-condemnation. Reflection turns experience into wisdom. Without it, mistakes repeat. With it, lessons accumulate. This practice accelerates growth and reinforces responsibility. Reprogramming a losing philosophy also means developing resilience. Resilience is not toughness without feeling. It is persistence with feeling. You will feel doubt. You will feel fatigue. You will feel resistance. The difference is that these feelings no longer control your behavior. You expect difficulty. You plan for it. When it arrives, you stay steady. This steadiness becomes a defining trait. As self-governance strengthens, your identity changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who trees and begin seeing yourself as someone who does. This identity shift is powerful because it influences every area of life. Decisions become simpler. Excuses lose their appeal. Focus increases. In the end, reprogramming a losing philosophy is not about dramatic transformation. It is about daily authority over self. When you control your actions, your thinking follows. When your thinking improves, your direction improves. And when direction is clear and consistent, results become inevitable. You no longer hope life will change. You lead the change yourself. Decide today that excuses are too expensive. Decide that your future deserves more than your comfort. Decide that your past will no longer dictate your philosophy. You are not here to repeat yesterday. You are here to redesign tomorrow. When you change the way you think, you change the way you choose. When you change the way you choose, you change the way you live. And when your philosophy becomes stronger than your excuses, your life will begin to reflect it. Reprogram the philosophy, and the results will follow.